Hey guys, it's Miss Birds again, and we are starting a new project today, which I'm very excited about. We are going to be working with Zentangles, and Zentangles are essentially an art form that's made up just of doodles. And the fun thing about Zentangles is that if you look at the root word Zen, right, which means kind of a calming effect, so essentially that's what Zentangles are supposed to do. We're supposed to just kind of calm down, let the patterns take a hold of us, and just have a good time, relaxed, and creating these doodles. Now, you probably doodle all the time in class when you're writing on your papers or when you're listening to me lecture. But today, we're gonna be putting our Zentangles into shapes, all right, or into the shape of our image here. And we're gonna create a different pattern for each part of what we're doing, which probably sounds a little confusing because my paper is blank and you have no idea what we're gonna be doing. So let's go ahead and start. So our Zentangles are gonna be put into a shape. And the shape that we're gonna be using, because it's spooky season and also fall, is we're gonna be creating a pumpkin. Okay, so what you'll need for this is a blank sheet of paper, okay? Notice that I have mine horizontal, right, going side to side, because we want a nice big wide pumpkin. When we draw our pumpkin, we want it to be very large, okay? So we want it to take up most of the room on our paper. Of course, if you don't have a plain white piece of copy paper, feel free to use a notebook paper, but of course, it is a lot better to just work with a plain piece of paper. And remember, if you haven't picked up your supplies packet, you're more than welcome to do so Monday through Friday from 9 to 12 at the library, okay? So let's go ahead and get started. So we want to make sure that we are drawing very large, okay? We want it to be a very large pumpkin, like I said. We want it to take up most of the room on our paper here, okay? Because that's going to be better and it's going to give us more room for when we break up our Zentangles. So what we're going to do when we create our pumpkin is we're actually going to start from the center. Now, there are many ways to draw a pumpkin. The pumpkin that I'm going to show you, or how to draw today, that I'm going to show you how to draw today, is going to have a lot of ribs in it, and the ribs are those really, really curved part of the pumpkin. And this one, the ribs are gonna be very accentuated, okay, which means that they're gonna stand out more. So we're gonna start from the very center of our pumpkin, and then we're gonna kind of work our way out, okay? So again, you want it to take up most of the paper. So this is the top of my paper, this is the bottom. You can have your pumpkin kind of sitting right at the bottom of your paper, or you can have it kind of moved up a little bit and make it look like it's sitting on something else if you want to. That'd be kind of cool. So it's however you would like to draw it, okay? So I'm gonna start just by drawing the center of my pumpkin, and I'm going to work in the center of my paper, and it's going to be like an oval shape. Okay, so an oval is like a flat circle, right? So I'm gonna go through, and I'm drawing very lightly at first because of course we wanna make sure that we always draw lightly, and then we can go back and make things darker if need be, okay, if we want to. So I'm just starting off with a nice oval shape. Okay, and as I've kind of formed my shape, I'm just gonna go over and I'm gonna make it a little bit darker. So remember, we always wanna start out lightly, right? That way, if we make any mistakes, we can go and we can erase them out. And then when we find a shape that we really like, we're just gonna go through and darken those edges. Now, you can darken the edges with your pencil, or if you'd like, you can do it with a pen, okay? You can do it with either like a ballpoint pen, like this, or if you have a black colored pencil, you can do it with that as well too, right? Those will both work. And it kind of just, especially when we, what am I trying to say here? If we outline things in black, what happens is that when we go to color it, it kind of just makes the color stand out more. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you have to color your pumpkin, but if you do choose to color your pumpkin after we do the Zentangles, the black is, again, just going to make that pattern and that color stand out more. So you probably want to do that. Okay, so at first, I've done my first step, which is creating the very center of our pumpkin. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna slowly take our pumpkin out and out a little bit to give it a nice rounded shape. okay? Because pumpkins are round, kind of like a sphere, right? Like a three-dimensional circle, almost. Okay, so I'm gonna go on my right side first. And I'm not gonna start from the very top of the oval, but I'm gonna go down a little bit and I'm going to round it out, curve it, and then bring it down and curve it up a little bit. Okay, it may be a little bit flatter at the bottom, and that's fine because of course pumpkins have something that they have to be sitting on, right? So when a pumpkin is placed down, some of the areas are going to be more rounded, but some of them may be a little bit flatter, and that's fine. And the best part about drawing a pumpkin is that really you can't mess it up, right? Pumpkins are all different types of shapes and forms, and so really you can get as creative or stylistic with it as you want. And even if it doesn't look exactly like mine, right, it's probably still gonna look like a pumpkin. So I'm gonna go through and I have the general shape that I'd like, so I'm just gonna darken it. Okay, so remember we always want to draw lightly, that way we can go back and darken areas or erase areas out, right, if we tend to make a mistake or not really like the shape that we're using. So I'm just gonna go through and darken that area. And then from here, I'm gonna create another shape. Okay, this one's not gonna be as wide, it's gonna be a little bit thinner. Of course, if you wanna make it really wide, you totally can. That is completely fine and up to you. It's your pumpkin, right? And just like I said before, there's no wrong way really to draw. Well, I guess there is kind of a wrong way, right? So if we took these lines and instead of curving them, if we just made them flat and straight, that would kind of be wrong, right? Because a pumpkin is a three-dimensional form, right? It's a sphere and it's curved, right? It's got a rounded edge to it. So your lines should be curved, right? That's what's going to make it look rounded. And pumpkins are generally round, okay? So let's go ahead and create our last one. I'm going to go not necessarily at the top again, right? I'm going to kind of bring it down a little bit and I'm going to just go through, lightly sketch my lines. Okay, remember I'm always going through and sketching my lines before I darken them. And of course, once I feel like I've really gotten that shape that I want, I can go in and darken those lines again. You may want to do the darkening of your lines at the end after you draw it. So if you just want to sketch everything out first just to see the look of it, that's fine, right? You can just go back later and darken the lines. You don't necessarily have to do it now, but I'm just doing it as I go through. Okay, so I have one side of my pumpkin done. Probably doesn't look that much like a pumpkin to you, but I promise after we do the other side, right, it'll start to look that way. So I'm just gonna move my paper over a little bit, and here's a little trick for you guys. If you're drawing something or you started drawing over here, and maybe it would have been smarter if I drew on the other side first so I wasn't putting my hand on this. But if you've drawn something down and you notice, if I were to go and draw like this, I'd probably be smearing that graphite, right? So I can take a paper like the one I have here and I can place it underneath my hand when I draw, and then it will kind of protect me from smearing that graphite. So if you have just like a plain piece of paper, you can put it underneath you while you're drawing, and it will help to kind of protect your drawing at the same time. I guess I can use this paper, that's fine. So again, from my center, I'm gonna go out. Remember, we're not taking from the very top of the pumpkin, but we're going to the side here. Remember, you can make it as wide as you want, or I guess as skinny as you want too. But the thing when we're drawing this pumpkin is that the more space you have here, the more space you're allowing yourself to go in and doodle, right? So that's kind of what we want to see. We don't want it to be too small, right? That's why we want to take up most of our paper. That way we can really see the patterns that we're going to be creating. So I'm going to go through, attach it together, and then I'm just going to go and do this one as well. and it's starting to look more like a pumpkin. I'm just going to change this line because I don't really like the way that looks. It looks like it's kind of going up more instead of being more rounded. Right, so initially I drew it very like curved up, so I'm just going to change that curve to go downward just so it gives it a more rounded quality because I like that better. Right, so my pumpkin is slowly but surely starting to come together. I'm just going to erase out some lines that I don't like, and I'm going to move this line up a little bit. Right, so you can go through and you can adjust your pumpkin to how your lines curve, where they curve, if you like the look of it, if you don't like the look of it, right? There's lots of things that we can go through and we can change about our pumpkin before we do the final outlining. Okay, so I think I'm pretty happy with the shape of my pumpkin so far. So I'm just gonna go through and again, just kind of darken these lines here. All right, and of course our pumpkin should have some type of stem. You can draw the stem however you'd like. I kind of like to have it curving upward. Something like that. Of course, you can draw your stem however you'd like. It is up to you. It is your pumpkin. All right, there we go. So now we have finished our pumpkin and we're gonna start, this is the fun part, putting in our Zentangles. Now a Zentangle is basically just any type of pattern. And remember, we talked about patterns last week, right? So we talked about creating a pattern is really just taking the same design or the same shape and then varying it and repeating it. So I have different examples of Zentangle patterns. Whoa, it's taking up my whole screen. And you can use some of these as examples. You can also do a Google image search for Zentangle patterns and you'll find a bunch of different stuff. So for each part of our pumpkin, right, for each rounded space of our pumpkin, we're gonna be putting in a different pattern. So you can choose whatever kind of patterns you like. What I would suggest when you're choosing your patterns is, remember, we always talk about variety, right? Variety is the spice of life and so is contrast. So sometimes it's really nice when you do a pattern that's really dark on one side, right? And then a pattern that's really light next to it, right? They're gonna make them stand out more. You can also do a pattern that's really small and then a pattern that's a little bit larger, and well, this pattern's a little bit larger, right? So if this pattern and this pattern were right next to each other, okay, it would be a nice contrast, right? This one's got the black in the background, this one has a lot more white, or this one, right? It's got a lot of white in the background, and those kind of smaller designs. So when you're choosing your patterns, I would do one at a time and I would vary it, right? A lot of these may seem a little bit overwhelming, but if you look at the pattern itself, a lot of them are just simple lines or shapes that are just repeated, right? So this one has these little half circle shapes that are just repeated, almost kind of like scales. And then it just has a vertical line going in the middle, right? So if we break it down into small areas, that's what's going to make it look very interesting. Now, I want you to start by choosing one pattern, and it can be one of the patterns that you see here, and this will also be on the assignment. So if you are having difficulty coming up with a pattern, you can always use or take from one of these. You can also, like I said, Google search for patterns because a lot of them will pop up. If you just look up Zentangle patterns, you'll get tons of different ideas for different types of patterns that you can use. Normally, when I do this assignment in my class, I have people use either pen or black marker, but of course, we don't necessarily always have those. If you do have them, you're more than welcome to, but you can also work from pencil right now. You just want to make sure that after your design has been created, that you go through and you really just define that pattern a little bit more. So I would suggest going over it and outlining it to be a little bit darker, or making sure that your black pencil, your black colored pencil is really, really sharp, and then going back and outlining that pattern. Again, it's just gonna make it stand out and it's gonna make it look really, really nice. So I have some black pens that I'm gonna be using, and this video, I just wanted to show you how to do the pumpkins, and I want you to start looking at the patterns, okay? And then I will create another video for when I actually start creating the patterns and putting them into my pumpkin, okay? And kind of explaining why I chose to do what I chose. All right, so for today, go ahead and start your pumpkin and start looking at different patterns that you think you may want to use for inside of your pumpkin.